Hi there, and welcome to the DMU and I podcast. This week we are all about Biodiversity Net Gain. It's a new challenge for our clients, and we're here to explain it, but also hopefully make it less scary than it needs to be. What's really interesting for DM is it challenges all of our skills we have across the business, our land, our planning, our geomatics. So really interesting for us that we can get all of our teams working together to help our clients. Before we get into the meat of it, I've got two experts in the room that are going to talk to me about it. Let me just introduce Caroline and James. Do you want to just introduce yourselves, a bit about you and DM?
Caroline Morris. I'm a director in the environment planning team. I probably spent the first 10 years of my career in the water industry in consultancy, but doing drainage, engineering, flood risk, river restoration, and had a little bit of time on the regulatory side at the Environment Agency at the very start. So really good base, and then moved on to land development projects, and I've since spent the last 6 years at Dalcour McLaren learning more on the utilities and infrastructure sector and leading the environment planning team to find those solution-led approaches across a whole suite of planning and environment disciplines.
Great. And James?
Yeah, I'm James Baird. I'm Technical Director and Ecology and BNG Lead for Dalcour McLaren. I sit in our environment planning team with Caroline. I relatively recently joined DM. Prior to joining here, I worked for many years in the residential sector. So I've been dealing with biodiversity net gain assessments on quite large-scale housing developments for some time prior to mandatory rollout, which we'll come on to speak about. So yeah, had got a good insight into BNG and some of the challenges that delivers.
Some people listening to this might go, BNG, what on earth are they talking about? Okay, so just in kind of layman's terms, let's just set out what do we mean by BNG or Biodiversity Net Gain, but we'll shorten it to BNG today so it makes more sense for people.
So when we talk about BNG, we're really talking about an approach to development that leaves the land in a measurably better state than it was prior to development. So in the simplest form, it's having a greater number of biodiversity units on the site than you had pre-development. Biodiversity Net Gain assessments, they use a metric, spreadsheet assessment tool, which uses habitats as a proxy for biodiversity. So we are measuring the amount of biodiversity on the site post-development, using habitats as that measuring technique. And you would have heard quite a lot about BNG recently, and for the past couple of years, because from February this year, all Town and Country Planning Act developments were subject to delivering mandatory BNG, a minimum of 10% BNG. And in April this year, small sites were also subject to the same requirement. There are some exemptions which we can get onto later, but we're also gearing up to November next year when our nationally significant infrastructure projects will also be subject to BNG.
How's BNG going to affect our clients, or it's already affecting our clients as we know? But they need to wake up and really understand this because it has quite a big impact. Can you sort of run through that and maybe give us some examples as well? Because I know like you said, developers have been doing it for years. Some of our clients have taken done this early as well, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think biodiversity net gain is very much leading towards those more commercial and housing residential developments, but actually it is a planning mandate that still applies to utilities clients as well under the Town and Country Planning Act changes, and it does affect all of their planning permissions that don't qualify for relevant exemptions. Aside from that, though, other utilities clients that have more larger linear schemes and looking at a huge strategic approach to how they deliver their projects often have their own environmental or internal environmental policies that require them to hit their own internal targets for net gain as well. So it's not just about that mandate, it's about actually achieving what they are set out to do within the wider industry. And it's one of many of the obligations and objectives out there under relevant programs for them to achieve better solutions that put nature first. So BNG is very much, starts out ecology focused, but actually it's looking about how we deliver projects and bring things more to the natural state and the natural environment as possible.
So just going back to basics, and you worried I was going to ask you a technical question today. I fear not. There'll be no technical questions from me today, but just basics. So I'm a project manager engineer. I've got to build, let's say, a treatment works, greenfield site. and I'm going to buy an acre to do it, and that's my developable area. Red line boundaries an acre. We don't need to make a detail here, but just outline what else now does he have to consider?
Yeah, there's a number of elements to it, really. I guess first of all is considering whether any parts of the development would qualify under permitted development rights. Permitted development is excluded from needing B&G, so it's always good to engage with a planning consultant or ecologist early on to understand if any of the PD elements of the scheme.
That's quite important, isn't it?
It is very important to our sector.
A lot of our clients some of them don't know their permitted development right.
Yeah.
So quite a few projects that we've been working on recently, we're sort of advising clients to amend the red line boundary to remove those PD elements from the red line area, which has the result of reducing the baseline area and therefore minimises the amount of biodiversity net gain you have to provide. So that's always good to look at that first and foremost. And then once you've established that you do need to provide B&G, it's one of the relevant developments, then you really need to understand the baseline position on the site and to do that as early as possible. So engage with an ecologist to do a baseline habitat survey, understand the value of the site pre-development. Are there any protected species constraints? Are there any irreplaceable habitats, any priority habitat that will need to be retained and enhanced? And this is something that I think often gets overlooked. It's about running a biodiversity calculation as early on in the project as you possibly can to understand what the likely impact of the scheme is going to be. It might be that the layout of the scheme changes 10 times before you get to submission, but run a draft calculation early on to understand what the unit loss or gain is. And then that can feed into looking at what additional land you may require. So do you have to bring in some additional land off site? Do you have to go and source some additional land from a habitat bank, for example? So engage early on.
I think you'd also make sure that you get everyone around the table and have the whole project team involved from that early outset. So there'll be many opportunities. Not only do you have to, if you can deliver B&G on site, actually, can you accommodate additional areas of sustainable drainage? Can you make space for whatever water is needed? Can you perhaps have a reed bed in there that allows for that tertiary treatment element to achieve your water quality limits and reduce the number of spills into the river from your CSOs, and rather than inundating that wastewater treatment works, can you actually accommodate and attenuate on the site? And can that same attenuation have biodiversity elements in there that can actually go some way to achieving?
I mean, you just talked about this kind of thing. Okay, you talked about going early. And I mean, to me, that is fundamental because you've got to get all of this in together and in a place that you can present, presumably, within the planning application.
Yeah, there are minimum information requirements that are set out in the PPG, the Biodiversity Net Gain PPG, and as a minimum, you need to understand the baseline position on the site. But you need to have understood what post-development habitats you need and whether you might need to produce a management plan for those. And because if you're engaged with off-site land, if that's not under the applicant's ownership or control, it will then obviously take some time to find that land, survey that land, secure the relevant legal agreement. So engaging as early as possible allows you to start making some inroads with that.
Yeah, and I think working with surveyors at that early stage as well, in terms of actually sourcing that land, having the discussions with your landowners, knowing if there are opportunities, are they actually doing something that they can turn their land over quite easily to have an agreement with the utilities company or the developer and actually piece all those bits of the jigsaw together, not only in that terms that legal obligation and having the legal signing, but having your planning specialist in there, having obviously the ecology early doors, but actually bringing all of that strategic discussion point together can really help you find that solution-led approach.
So just going back to the not right at the beginning again, but just this assessment that you do, case, and this is points win. Well, I say points win prizes. I don't necessarily win prizes here, but it's all about the units and unit loss. So I don't need to know warts and all, but very quickly, you go to a site. So going back to my acre site that I bought. And it's not got PD rise, it's too big, right? So it's going down it's got a planning application that's got to go in. What do you need to do to assess that site? How do you go about assessing it?
So as an ecologist, we would go out and do a habitat survey. So we do a UK habitat classification survey. So we would identify the habitats that are present, map those habitats, and record the condition of those habitats. So all habitats within the red line boundary are identified, mapped, and assessed for their condition. And that really establishes your baseline. And yeah, without going into too much detail on the metric, the habitat units are valued based on the condition of the habitat, the significance of those locally, and how difficult it is to recreate those habitats, their rarity. There's quite a few factors that play into that habitat score that you get.
So rather than me as an engineer coming and going, here you are, here's my 1 acre site, it sounds to me that actually you guys need to get involved even before that, because part of the site selection process should be you certainly having an overview and going, that's a good one, that's a terrible one, because your units are going to be huge if you go and upset a pond or a...
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I guess it's something that I have to do a lot as an ecologist, is always caveat my advice from the desk that we haven't been to site yet. But I'll always say to clients, let's have a look from the desk, use Google Earth, use satellite imagery. You can normally get a pretty good idea of what the overall habitats are. So if it's a, intensive arable field, it gets a lot more challenging when you've got grassland on site and, you need to kind of be on site to check the value of the grassland. But there's so much available information now that we can access from our desks to understand what the baseline might be. And like I say, we have to be caveated that it needs to be surveyed, but it is always good at that early stage, site selection, feasibility stage, to have an ecologist to have a quick sense check that you're not, tearing through an ancient woodland or through a network of ponds.
Yeah, and I think that the wider picture to that is actually mapping all of that relevant data, looking at that bigger picture. The more data, the better.
This then links to what you were talking about there, links to actually then the next bit, which is, okay, I've chosen a site, there you are, we're going for it, we can't change it, it's got to be there, water abstraction point, etc., we can't move. You've got X number of units then to fulfill, and like you say, you then, because there's lots of options, aren't there, for developers out there in terms of what they can do. Do you want to just quickly run through what those options are? Because you touched on something there about, if you go to certain sites, you get more points. And I think it'd be useful just to have that to understand what your options are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that the closer to the loss and in terms of geographic distance from that, and the biodiversity net gain as close to the loss as possible, you get more points and units effectively. But you are looking initially on the mitigation hierarchy to avoid any loss. So initially that mapping we talked about, saying, avoid irreplaceable habitats like your ancient woodlands, avoid those sensitive sites, and then minimise that loss, and then looking at that, mitigating what that looks like. And then that mitigation hopefully is on site within your red line boundary of your planning application area. And like James said, actually, that's where some of those discussions early on at that concept stage, and can you just tweak your design? Can you actually amend it and look at this area, avoid this part, and help look at really minimising what the loss is in terms of those units and the metric calcs. And then if you can't deliver on-site, then you look at your off-site locations, and then wider from that, you look at as a last resort credits. So James, what makes on that?
So there is a hierarchy to that, as Caroline's touched on. So first and foremost, you should try to provide your habitat units on-site, and then look off-site. The last resort is to buy sort of statutory credits from the government.
There's a huge price tag on those as well.
It varies depending on the habitat, but you have to provide 2 credits for every one that you need, and they're purposely costed quite highly to dissuade developers from using them. So I think the majority of where the units will be placed, particularly for utility and infrastructure projects, is in that off-site market because of the operational constraints on the existing assets. And it's something that we have to be very alive to when we're looking at B&G for our utilities clients, is that those assets have future expansion plans, operational needs. So actually, it's not feasible or practical to put the B&G on the site.
I'll touch on that because I think in the past, quite a few clients have had problems where they may have had a big site to start with. They've started some sort of nature projects within the site, and actually it's really stymied them, and they've come to increase. And I think it's fair to say majority of our clients are all looking at massive changes to their networks and which is going to increase construction and etc. So yeah.
So if we look at that off-site market, the developer has that option to bring forward their own solution, where they might work with a local landowner to bring through a habitat enhancement scheme. So looking to enhance the habitats and manage and maintain it for 30 years. Or there is quite a few habitat banks that are available, and you can purchase units directly from those banks. Off-site units can also contribute to local nature recovery networks. And this is actually what's really exciting, really, as an ecologist, because around the country, there are these local nature recovery strategies that are being set up. And by the time they're all set up, there'll be 48, I think it is, across the country with no gaps and no overlaps. And within those recovery areas, there are strategic planting schemes, habitat creation, enhancement schemes that are creating large-scale habitat corridors. And if you as a developer are able to purchase some of the units from that area or provide some habitats, then you get an uplift in the biodiversity metric. So it's kind of win-win. The developer gets more bang for his buck. He's getting more units for the same piece of land, but it's also contributing to wider nature recovery.
Yeah, okay. And that is really interesting, actually, that we're, dare I say, people are getting their stuff together. I think another area, potentially, you're saying whether I'm right or wrong here, but our clients, some of them still have quite significant property ownership themselves. And it's, I know some of them aren't necessarily going to be slap bang next door to my site necessarily, but, if clever management of those could help them as well.
Yep, certainly. Yeah. And one of the big challenges that, in the short time I've been at DM that I've seen for utilities and infrastructure clients is quite often the number of biodiversity units they need is relatively small. It might be, half a unit or one unit. And to go and secure that unit off-site, you still have to have a 30-year habitat management monitoring plan and a legal agreement. So there's all of the costs associated with setting that up and managing and maintaining those habitats. Whereas actually, if developers can think strategically, and think, okay, in the next few years, we've got X number of projects coming forward in this local authority area, and this is the unit requirement, they could actually offer some meaningful habitat creation. And as I say, as an ecologist, that's really what we want out of BNG. BNG wasn't designed as a half a unit here and a third of a unit here.
So some of our clients are going to do a lot of work over the next 5-10 years. Could proactively go out there and go, actually, we roughly know what we're going to be building, 20 substations or whatever it might be. So we know that with a footprint of X, so we know what our roughly average, and they can be proactive and focus on one area rather than, like you say, these small little areas.
And developers are doing that. Obviously, some are more tuned into this than others. And as I said, experience from the residential sector, a lot of clients and developers have been working with BNG metrics for years, submitting them voluntarily as part of the planning application as an additional benefit to the scheme. And a lot of developers are looking at bringing forward their own solutions. I'm not saying that's necessarily the way for all clients. It's a lot of work. You need the right skill sets in-house, but we should be focusing our efforts on those strategic contributions because it's better for biodiversity. This legislation is here to address the biodiversity decline, the government's response to address biodiversity decline in the planning system. So it wasn't designed for us to be delivering small number of units everywhere. If we can provide a more holistic strategic approach.
A lot of our clients will see BNG as like, oh my God, I've got another consent, another issue that I didn't have before that I now need to get. Now, if you look at it in terms of our clients who are building, they've got 1,000 projects on in any one year. That's quite a neat solution, isn't it? To go, hang on, let's wrap these all up. And I know you have to do it by maybe local authority area, but actually wrap it up. And that'll take a massive headache away from them, won't it?
Absolutely. A lot of them already have sort of mapped out their land portfolios and had a look from gathering AI data and other elements without ground truthing. Initially, you can get a good view of actually what is the makeup and habitat of the land they do own and where are the opportunities. I think all the challenges and the pressures, the southeast with the water abstraction and potable water and the chalk streams and those sort of challenges versus the water quality, the bathing rivers, flooding issues, and bringing it all together and actually making sure that they've had a look at across the whole of their portfolio, look at a catchment wide as well as national wide as well, in terms of what their land is and where the B&G opportunities are, but where you can actually double up.
I think in my experience, developers sort of get their fingers burned a few times. They get to a planning determination. They haven't got their B&G sorted, and then they have to go and think, well, where's the B&G coming from? Then they go down a long road to try and find offsite land, get it surveyed, get the lead agreements in place. Developers go through that a few times, and then they realise, actually, we need to start thinking about this earlier on. So we can get the message across to start engaging with the process much earlier on and looking at your portfolio projects that are coming forward, thinking strategically. It means those individual projects don't have that delay through the planning process.
Which I think is a big challenge, because, I mean, our clients have got a challenge enough in just getting and delivering what they've got to deliver. So anything we can do that actually speeds that up is going to help them. You've been involved in certainly with Severn Trent, I think, haven't you, with some projects that they've got their teeth into?
Yeah, so some of the green recovery schemes particularly, that are very much sustainable drainage focused in terms of looking at a larger catchment water-based approach to slowing surface water flooding down, having attenuating at source, and actually trying not to overload some of the combined sewer systems and not overload the water treatment works as well, to actually hold some of the flows back and bring it in a more natural state. And a lot of different SUDS techniques and interventions that are throughout a whole catchment, so not just your detention basins.
On those kind of projects, that's where you're adding, you're within actually the construction site. They are on site because you're...
Yeah, they can be, and across the whole catchment. And within that, actually, you've got opportunities to do biodiversity net gain if you are producing or providing a large attenuation area as a detention basin. Then you've got the ability to do some planting and achieve some of your B&G for those planning areas around. So, some of the green recovery examples are great, not necessarily pure planning led, but.
Yeah, and James, I guess you're an old hand at this, because you've been dealing with developers for years. I'm old, all right. You've done this for developers. Give us some examples of some of the schemes you've done in terms of just the. What I'm interested in is kind of, okay, we've got to go out and we've got to build our units up. What are the kind of schemes that you end up building to make sure you hit those unit points?
My background's really working on sort of large strategic garden cities with large grid infrastructure offerings. So naturally, then they lend themselves to be able to provide a lot more B&G on site. The challenge there always comes with setting realistic expectations for that habitat is going to become, because you have the pressures of recreational use, dog walking, dog fouling, disturbance and everything else, nutrient enrichment, things like that. So that's quite a key consideration. And also, a lot of the B&G land is former arable land, so it's probably subject to years and years of fertilizer and pesticide sprays, so nutrient levels are normally quite high, and that's a real challenge. Without getting too nerdy, when we're looking to create kind of species-rich wildflower meadow, we're looking to provide kind of low nutrient levels. So we're able to look at sort of techniques to kind of strip out nutrients. So there's quite a few challenges around that.
Okay. You talked about, and I absolutely, this is the message I'm getting from you guys. Early engagement is really, really important. Strategic thinking is also really important. Are there any other real key things that our clients need to really think about?
Yeah, I think, part of that strategic piece as well is pulling all the disciplines in together at that early stage and really mapping out what the opportunities are. So, ecology at that early stage, but actually also having that drainage consultant, the land surveyor, the guys who know the land, and consulting with all the stakeholders and other consultees who may have other schemes in the area and have good examples that you could link up with. There's the local authority, local planning authority websites to have a look at and bring in all the planning detail and information as well. So it's about that multidisciplinary approach to it and really finding that best optimum solution with all the other challenges that are across schemes.
Yeah, just to sort of back that up really, as an ecologist, I could deliver B&G on a scheme relatively easily by planting a load of bramble scrub, for example. It would probably score reasonably well in the metric, but actually it's what right for the environment, it's what's right for the scheme, and it's about placemaking. So it's about working with other disciplines. So working with your landscape architect, your heritage consultant, what are the other constraints, delivering holistic, multifunctional solutions. So that don't just tick the B&G box, that provide other solutions on site as well.
So going back to my magic project that I've got of an acre site with a I think it's a pumping station I said on it, anyway, whatever it was. I'm the project manager and I'm thinking, oh my God, these people are telling me all this about B&G. I've got to do something about it. Why would I pick up the phone to DM? And if I was going to pick up the phone, what on earth, what am I expecting them to do for me?
So I think if you give us a call in first instance and we can run through what the B&G requirements are for the site, and having established that it does require B&G first and foremost, we need to engage with an ecologist. So you'd be coming to us and pointing us to an ecology survey, so a baseline habitat survey and a B&G assessment. And that ecologist will do all of the surveys, the assessment work, the reports for the planning application. And then when we get further down the line, they can write the habitat management and monitoring plan. But it's not just ecologists that you'll need as part of the B&G process. There's another other elements and specialists as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at those very early stages, we do a feasibility study for that project manager to say, well, why do you need the scheme? What's the driver? What is the delivery route for this? Is it planning led? And like James said, you sort of capture that initial data and work with the geomatics team to map out what that data looks like. What sort of designations have we got? What archaeological and heritage constraints might there be? What's the landscape designation? Have we got, and talk to the land team about the landowners and doing that land referencing point. So it's about mapping that initial data and getting as much together as we can, and then working with that project manager to find that solution piece to take through what compliance is needed. So if it is planning led and we do need to achieve that B&G mandate for planning, then yeah, absolutely, we start with that ecology piece. Our planning consultants will then advise through that process, which is quite a set out process in terms of producing a planning statement, informing are you going to deliver B&G through on-site or off-site, and how are you actually going to achieve it. And then once you do obtain your planning, you then have to produce a biodiversity net gain plan, which then gives all the detail of actually what that looks like, whether it's on-site or off-site, what is that legal obligation. And then you've got your habitat monitoring and management plan as well, which again adds on more of the detail about how you look after it, how you make sure that those trees don't just die after a year and they're not just left alone, actually, that you have got a meaningful piece here and then you've got a client that is responsible and can maintain what they've said. So you've got your planning consultant involved. You've got to make sure that actually, is it off-site, you need to consult with your landowners. You need your surveying colleagues who know our landowners really well. They work across the whole of the country. So actually that network of opportunity to understand what we can bring to a project delivery there. So the mapping piece, the planning piece, the land piece, and the ecology at the forefront of that, along with the other disciplines that come into it. So if you are going down the planning route, you need a drainage consultant, a transport consultant. You might need to cut down some hedgerow because you need certain visibility splay. So you need to actually look at all of the elements of a site and all those technical pieces, and actually bringing all that together, having that strategic picture means you've got a really good solution-led approach that you can tell that project manager and that client that there's a way through here. We've mapped it out. We know exactly what to do, and we've got the right experts and specialists at the right time in the project to deliver it and actually find that end solution that's really cost-effective and is program-led because you've really understood the needs of that client.
Great. So really, fairly uniquely, we're in quite a good place to be able to offer all of that.
Absolutely.
As a one-stop shop.
Yeah. Portfolio specialists working together really, really well within DM is relatively rare. You don't have your pools and pockets of individual specialists and consultants. Actually, to have our land specialists working really closely with our ecologists and our planning team is quite unique. And actually, our knowledge and expertise in the utilities and infrastructure sector, again, you've got a lot who do work on the housing developments and the commercial development side of things and understand that business, but really understanding our clients who have extensive permitted development rights and they have their own internal B&G targets and other pressures and obligations. So it isn't just through a planning-led route, but actually you've still got to have the knowledge and understanding of what other stakeholders need and other consultees, and actually what are the other policy and compliance requirements out there across all of land and consents management. So it's actually just helping them navigate their best way. We've been there, done that, and we can find that solution-led approach.
Excellent. Good. So I think to sort of sum it up, we've gone through this new thing called BNG, which might be quite frightening to some people. And really the answer here is get in there early and we can make it less scary for you. We're at the early days of BNG. I think there's probably still a lot of learning that a lot of our clients and us will do over the next few years. But thanks for your input today. Hopefully we've explained BNG to people who don't know about it, but also help people who do know about it. I think we've got some really quite good ideas that are coming out from us to help our clients. And I'll challenge you, in about a year's time, I'll get you back where we'll have a lot more of these schemes under our belt. Then we can talk about it in a bit more detail. But thanks for your time today, guys.
Thank you, James.
Thank you very much.